right, good morning, everybody. Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talk. We're live from East Greenbush, New York. Still the only streaming webcast, sports webcast from East Greenbush, New York, I believe. And I kind of like hanging my hat on that little note. It's a beautiful Friday morning here in the Northeast. I hope it is nice where you are. It's been a great week here. I want to start by thanking my guest from last week, Greg Pryor. Greg was awesome. It's just full of great stories from the 70s and 80s, both in the Yankee organization and with the White Sox and Royals. Make sure you check out his book, When the Yankees Made Me Shave. And Greg actually played Pebble Beach yesterday, so I'm waiting to hear his results. I did see some talk about his 18th hole, and he kept the ball dry, so that's a good thing for Greg. I hope to hear how the rest of his round went. One quick note before we move on today. I had some comments about my mug or my horrible mug last week. So my beautiful wife bought me this mug with my mug on it for my birthday and the TGI Sports Talk logo. So we've got some official swag for me anyway. And we have our first official sponsor, albeit unpaid. It's Built by Cake. I don't normally have cookies for breakfast, but these are protein cookies. And I promised to kind of give a shout out to Christina Mathewson. You can reach her at Built by Cake on Instagram. These things are awesome. And I probably shouldn't eat like 12 of them at once, even though they're protein cookies, but they're awful good. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold myself back. Anyway, on to today. My guest today is Mike Vaccaro. Mike's a columnist with the New York Post, has been since 2002, I believe. He's a St. Bonaventure graduate, which I know he's very proud of. And he kind of goes back to the time, or can go back to the time when the Bonnies were very relevant in the world of college basketball, and they have been on and off through the years, but he kind of goes back to the time where they went to a Final Four. Mike has some, one of the reasons I love following Mike's column, and I kind of dated him a little bit the other day when I mentioned to him, it felt like I've been reading him since I was a kid, and I know I'm older than Mike, but he does a great job of talking about today's sports world and also talking about the past. Just in recent weeks, he's had articles about obviously the Mets and the Nets in the playoffs, not the Mets in the playoffs, but the Nets in the playoffs, the Mets and Yankees, Major League Baseball season starting. He's had an article about Mickey Mantle and the passing of Horace Clark. Those of you who are Yankee fans of a certain age certainly remember Horace Clark. And I think it's great the way he kind of mixes up, today and yesterday. So those of you that are here today, I thank you for popping in the room. I see Sherry and Steve Warpello and some others, but we're going to move on and bring in Mike Vaccaro from the New York Post. Welcome, Mike.
Keith, I want 2 of those cookies if you don't mind. You can have them express delivered. I'd appreciate that.
I will get a hold of Built by Cake this morning if you like, and we'll see if we can do that. That'll be your swag for being on the show, I guess. Today will be.
Sounds good. I'll take it. I'll take my payment in calories or lack thereof.
If we got paid by calories, man, I'd be in big trouble.
That'd be good. Yes.
Well, I thank you for being with me today, Mike. As I mentioned, I've been following you for quite a while, not as long as I thought, but but that's probably better for you. You do remind me, you're writing, I guess, of some of the people that I read when I first started getting, the New York News. We didn't get the upstate here. We didn't get all the papers all the time from the city. We started getting the Daily News first. Sorry for bring up the competitor, but they were the first one that came up. And then when the Post came up, that's where I went to, because I really liked the Post a lot better. And obviously when guys like you came along, it just improved it for me. So, You obviously jumped around a little bit since you graduated college too. You've had some different writing, or I should say, positions in the journalistic world. But I'm sure the Post is your longest tenure by far.
Oh yeah, it is, and it's the place I wanted to wind up since I was 7 years old. That my father would bring it home on the train. So that's always been kind of my lifelong ambition. Before at the end of the In the early part of my career, I worked in some smaller papers in Olean, New York, which is where St. Bonaventure is, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, for a couple of years, and Middletown, New York, up in Orange County, and then Kansas City, where I worked at the Kansas City Star for about a year. The Newark Star Ledger brought me home for about 3.5 years, and starting in 2002, I've been at the Post. And
I'm curious. As you said, the Post is where you wanted to end up. Who did you read when you were younger that kind of got you headed down that path?
Steve Serby, which he loves to hear. He loves to hear that I was reading him when I was 8 years old. He loves that story.
Yeah.
Steve, of course, is a dear colleague of mine still, and a really just a good, not just a great friend, but he's been honestly a legend in New York sports writing for many years. He was one guy. The Post was the latter-day home of Dick Young, which was kind of the only sports writer my father read. So while he was a Daily News / Post guy, he would read the Daily News on the train in and the Post on the way home. His loyalties tended to go with Dick Young, and so as a result, my young loyalties went with Dick Young, and so I was a fairly regular reader of the Post. And in those days, I mean, we also got Newsday. So I think when I started to learn how to that I wanted to be a little bit of a stylist also. I mean, they had some wonderful options in Steve Jacobson and Joe Gergen, and for a time Bill Knack was a columnist there. So it was a pretty nice series of possibilities in the newspapers I grew up reading.
Well, that's awesome. You did a great job. Dick Young is one of the guys that I grew up reading as well. It really got me turned on to the New York sports world, and I think it's great that he's one of somebody that you.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of him running Tom Seaver out of town.
Well, that's a different story. Latter day Dick Young started to kind of go around the bend a little bit.
But I certainly appreciated then that he was a guy who had pretty influential voice in New York sports. And, I'm not sure any of us have that kind of influence anymore, but it certainly harkens to a time when you would pick up the newspaper and see what the columnist had to say. And, usually 4 or 5 days later, the local GM would probably follow suit. That's the way it was back in the day, not just in New York, but in most prominent sports cities. I'm not saying it's the best way to do business, but that was certainly a way it was done. It certainly was one of the things that attracted me to trying to be a sports columnist.
Yeah, it's different today, I guess, with the immediacy of the internet. I can read your article the night before it hits the Post, even, and we'll get to that in a second. You also have written some really good books as well. By the way, there's one that I have to get to, and I just downloaded it actually. The ones I have read are Empires and Idiots, 100 Years. Trying to think of the subtitle now. The 100-year rivalry of the
subtitle's longer than the book. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good book. And 1941, The Greatest Year in Sports, is awesome as well.
That was my video. I enjoyed writing that book more than anything I've done professionally, because it was a good idea that was kind of a collaboration of me and my editor at Doubleday Publishing, and it just kind of sprang from there. And it was it kind of combines my affinity for sports and for history. And 1941 really was an unprecedented year in our world, and certainly in sports. So I really enjoyed doing that book a lot.
It was a great read. And I hadn't read the first Fall Classic yet. That's been out for quite some time, but I came across it on Kindle, downloaded it actually a few days ago. So I plan on diving into that. So I really recommend anybody who likes to read good sports books, look up Mike Vaccaro's entries that we just talked about. So very good stuff there. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I guess we'll jump right into it. I mean, Major League Baseball is certainly in the forefront now, and the Yankees have been off to a great start, even though their nemesis, the Rays, have been kind of beating them up here recently. But unfortunately, I guess we'll start with I think Major League Baseball's done a decent job with handling the COVID situation and manipulating the schedule to overcome the issues that some teams have had, like the Marlins and the Reds or Cardinals have had at the worst. Obviously, they got to play like 11 doubleheaders, but now we've come to have to kind of come to the realization it's real here in New York for the first time, as your article this morning talks about. The Mets have had some breakout. Tonight's game has been postponed. Is there anything further on that, Mike, or do you want to elaborate at all on?
Yeah, I mean, look, we 0-0 is that tonight's out. I'd be very surprised if they play tomorrow. I'll frankly be surprised if they play all weekend. I think they play the Yankees 3 games next weekend. It wouldn't surprise me if all 3 of those games are doubleheaders.
You got to be safe, and it's inevitable. Probably, I think it's happened each time where there's been a positive case that there's been at least a few more. On the Cardinals case.
It started out on opening night when the Nats thought that Juan Soto had it, And it's interesting how it's evolved, because on opening night there wasn't even a question they were going to play the game. Figure, well, it's just one player, so we'll muddle on without this player. And then, excuse me, a couple of days later, the incident with the Marlins happened, where one case became 5 cases, became 10 cases, became 18 cases, and all of a sudden baseball realized it needed a new protocol, and it couldn't just muddle on once these things happen. So they're clearly erring on the side of caution now. And when a team gets positive, they're going to take a couple of days off and try and get things right, which is where the Mets are right now.
Yeah, I think it'll be hard, on some of these teams to kind of get all the games in. But the Major League Baseball as a whole, I think, has done pretty well. I mean, in the beginning, I was very happy the season started. I'm a big baseball fan, and I think you had an article out that kind of alluded to this as well. I mean, sports is important to this country, and what thing that was really, for myself as a sports fan, my wife was probably tired of me watching YouTube in 1977 and 78 Yankee games, which I don't get tired of, but it is fun to have some live action. I assume that you were happy the season started and the NBA restarted and such. You still feel that way? I mean, even though we've had some of the hiccups that we've had?
I mean, I am. I was very skeptical at first that they would even get to opening day. I remain a little skeptical that they're going to get to the end of the season, just because, we've seen these hiccups here and there, and we haven't really yet have a second outbreak, which everybody in the science community tends to think is coming at some point, right around the time of the playoffs. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic. And yes, I mean, look, I mean, it's a different experience watching games without fans, watching games with no off the field energy. It was going to be surreal this weekend, watching the Subway Series without anybody in the stands, just because that's usually a very high energy event, especially at Citi Field, which tends to be a very high energy facility. And so it's already been a little bit surreal. But I mean, that said, I'm happy to have it back. I'm certainly happy to have the hockey and the basketball back. Now, the bubbles seem to really have been well thought out and well planned out. I mean, the lack of positives tells you that not only was it well planned, but also that the athletes are committed to living a little bit of a relatively Spartan lifestyle in order to get to the end of their seasons. So that's encouraging. Even the NFL is at a minimum of positives given the nature of their game.
That's hard to believe.
And they're not in a bubble, although they've tried to replicate as bubble-ish a life as they can with the facility upgrades they've had to try and minimize the virus's impact. So baseball is always going to be the most vulnerable, because they're essentially trying to live a regular life, getting on airplanes, staying in hotels, asking 25-year-old baseball players to stay in hotels. And for the most part, that's happened. I actually had another column in today's newspaper, which ran the editorial page about baseball success, which of course seems ironic given what happened to the Mets later in the day. But my point was that what happened in Cleveland last week, I think, was an indication of why it's got a chance to succeed, because obviously 2 Indians pitchers broke protocol, went out in Chicago, were caught, were sent home, were then sent to the alternate site because their attitude after getting caught wasn't exactly the best.
Yeah.
And you got to credit the Indians for that, because that's 2/5 of their starting rotation. And Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger are awfully good pitchers, and they decided that they would rather honor protocol than do whatever they could to win. And losing 2 pitchers for 2 weeks in a 60-game season is a serious statement of how you want to honor the protocol. But it's also credit to the Indians themselves, the players. Usually there's a great wall of silence in a clubhouse, and it's usually everybody kind of closes ranks, even when players get in trouble. And in this case, they had no problem calling them out publicly on the record. And I thought that was a wonderful sign that these players are committed. I think it represents the attitude of 99% of baseball players. I mean, they figure if they're going to play, they're going to be serious about it.
Yeah.
They can sacrifice 2 months of their own personal liberties in order to make sure that the sport itself survives. And I think that's a telling, I guess, talisman for hope. I mean, you hope that that's going to be enough. I mean, the virus is kind of a clever scoundrel, so you never know how it's going to react to anything. And certainly, like I said, I mean, I wrote that column at 2 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock, the Mets game is called off because they have a couple of COVID cases.
Yeah.
But you knew that this was going to be part of what you lived with. And I think that's part of what baseball has been trying to get across to the general public, is that nobody expected there to be 0 cases. They expected to have to deal with the virus. They have become they've adapted to how they've gone with the virus. And obviously, like I said, at the beginning of the season, the notion was thought that you could actually play through 1 or 2 positive tests until you realized that that was going to lead to bad consequences. So they've adjusted. And look, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, like you said, the Cardinals have all those doubleheaders stacked up. The Mets are now going to have a couple of doubleheaders stacked up. I mean, if you're looking at the Mets in a pure baseball standpoint, they finally putting a couple of good games together. They were going to face the Yankees at a time when the Yankees were diminished. But these things are all kind of secondary to try and make sure you actually get on the field and do it safely. And that's kind of what the challenge that baseball faces right now.
Yeah, and it is good that the players are self-policing themselves a little bit, because it's different than if the normal world hijinks that goes on, I'm sure, in Major League Baseball, right, where you just, you're obviously not going to rat out your teammate for whatever we might be doing, but you're talking about families, and the virus extends beyond the clubhouse, obviously. So it's good that they're doing some of that. Talk about the bubble with the NBA and the NHL. I mean, they have been very successful as far as lack of positives. It's funny watching the games. I feel like watching the games on TV. Major League Baseball is a little bit better than the NBA. It just feels more sterile. I don't know why.
I think it's personal preference, because it's funny. I mean, I think if you line up 10 people and ask, what do you prefer, the cardboard cutouts at Major League games or the virtual fans at NBA games? I mean, personally, I like the NBA. It just seems to replicate the experience better. But I've also heard from people who couldn't possibly disagree more with that it just seems absurd. So I think it's a matter of personal preference, and I think all it does is it kind of reinforces in everybody that. And I don't think. Look, there's a million reasons why we can't wait to get back to our old world. Can't wait to get the other side of this virus, hoping for a vaccine, hoping for a way to kind of reintegrate back into the way the world that we know operated. But, specific to our world of sports, I think just to be able to go to a facility where there's actual live fans gathering to cheer and to root for teams, that's going to be really the for those in the sports realm, it's going to be I think the sign that times have returned to normal. But for now, they'll have to do, and we have to put up with the silliness of cardboard cutouts and fake crowd noise and fake crowds.
I did hear too that maybe that Major League Baseball is going to consider a bubble type atmosphere come the playoff time. I don't know whether that's gained any traction or not, but maybe something, as you alluded to earlier, as we move into the fall and towards the playoffs, if we do have some kind of resurgence, if we're able to even finish the season, they may have to consider something like that. Yeah,
I think that they will consider everything. I mean, look, I know baseball has taken a little bit of heat for not choosing a bubble situation for the regular season, but for so many reasons, that was just implausible. I mean, baseball is a different sport than the others. I mean, there's more players involved, so you're talking about trying to keep more moving pieces in one place. There's, you have to play in a stadium. I mean, it's a lot easier to replicate a basketball situation they could have done it in a junior high gym if they needed to, because all you need is the requisite court. Obviously, baseball is a lot more sprawling facility, and there are fewer of those facilities. And then you add into the fact that in March would look like the ideal bubble locations, which are Florida, Texas, and Arizona, by summertime were awful hot spots. So, and right now, we can talk about New York being the possibility for a great bubble location because numbers are great, but who knows if that's going to be the case in October or November. So, again, I mean, when you're dealing with an opponent like the virus, which really doesn't have it doesn't have a lot of tells. So, I mean, it kind of moves as it wants to move, and it's in its own way has adapted the way it wants to adapt, and kind of wrecking our lives. It's hard, and a bubble in baseball for the regular season would have been difficult. I think once you have fewer teams, I think maybe it's a little bit more feasible, more doable. It wouldn't surprise me if we wound up seeing the World Series contained to someplace like Dodger Stadium. or someplace like that. And I think that baseball, both ends of baseball would probably agree to that as a way to make sure that we end the season and actually do crown a champion. It's going to be but it's definitely going to be an interesting next couple of months to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, agreed. And it is good to have sports back. We got to stay safe. As I keep mentioning, we have to keep the cardboard cutouts safe even as well. Everybody's got to be smart about this, even as much as we want to see live sports. I hope everybody stays smart as they have. We'll kind of move on to, some of the action itself, which, COVID has got to be addressed, unfortunately, but the action itself has been good. And for anybody who's just joining us, my guest today is Mike Vaccaro, columnist for New York Post, covers all the major professional sports and college sports. And we'll touch on as much of that as we can today. Getting into the season itself, Mike, I mean, the Yankees have been off to a great start. I'm still leery that if they have enough starting pitching. I mean, Garrett Cole, you had a great article on Garrett Cole the other day yourself, and he's been a great addition. Just the way he carries himself, I think, is just a huge addition to the team. And his reaction, while, some people may think he was disrespectful the other night, I like the fire and the fact that he doesn't want to give up the ball. Do you think the Yankees have enough pitching when we get to the postseason?
Look, nobody ever has enough pitching.
Yeah.
We always want more. Obviously, the Yankees' pitching has been a concern after Cole. Wasn't helped yesterday by James Paxton winding up in an MRI tube. Wasn't helped the other night by Zach Britton kind of limping off the mound. Hasn't been helped by Aroldis Chapman being on the COVID list for as long as he was. But that said, I mean, what a team looks like now is going to be awfully different from what it looks like September 27th when the regular season ends. But right now, it's nice for the Yankees to know that you have Garrett Cole on your side, knowing that he'll be around to pitch game one of any series, certainly a short series, certainly the mini series to kick things off. And yeah, look, I mean, I get it. A lot of old school people reacted badly to Cole's kind of petulance the other night. To me, I mean, I think the greater enemy in professional sports is complacency and too many athletes who act very corporate and very passive. And, are there to cash the checks on the 1st and the 15th. I mean, to me, it's refreshing to see someone who cares so much. And look, I mean, did he show up as manager? I guess, but you know what? I mean, to me, I think that part of being a manager is understanding that you have to find a way to maximize a competitive spirit. Roger Clemens' managers had to discover that all through time.
Right.
Some did, some didn't. Joe Torre did, and got maximum results out of him. And I think Cole's the same way. And look, I mean, Aaron Boone wasn't even remotely upset by his reaction. He was a little bit amused or bemused that it was still a story a day later. But
yeah,
it's. I think he'd rather have a guy who cared too much than one that didn't care at all. I mean, if you're sitting there and you're getting your head handed to you and living, giving up 6 runs and don't have anything, and that doesn't bother you, I think that would be more of a problem for me as a manager, as opposed to a guy who wanted to go the full 7. And especially, I find it interesting the dichotomy in these old school beliefs, because on the one hand, people of that philosophy all want pitchers to throw 170 pitches again and all go 9, and yet here you have a guy who wanted to go 7. And he gets a little bit of blowback because of his attitude. I mean, to me, you can't have it both ways. And to me, I'd rather have a team comprised of Garrett Coles whose pride, kind of makes them want to take the ball whenever possible, and whose competitive fury is kind of apparent. I mean, I'd rather have a player like that if it were my choice.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Aaron Boone handled it well in his post-game remarks too. He was just like. That's just a competitive guy out there. I understand that. And I'm an old school guy myself, and there's a lot of things in the game today that really just drive me nuts. But a guy like that who goes out there and he hammers and pounds the strike zone, and he wants to, as you said, 7 innings. I think he wants to go 9 innings, to be honest with you.
Sure.
But, I like that competitive fire, and it's something the Yankees, there's too many guys in all of baseball that, it comes to 5th or 6th inning, they're looking at the dugout waiting for somebody to come and get them.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. I mean, look, I mean, if you want people to just spit on it and rub a little dirt in it and move on, you can't also then say that they need to know where certain boundaries are of decorum. When you're playing a sport, you're playing on adrenaline, you're playing on emotion. Certainly, Garrett Cole is an emotional guy, and that's the reason why he's so effective.
Agreed.
Why he can crank it up to 98 when he needs to is the reason why, when a guy wants to take the ball away from him, he's a little upset, and I'll take it. I'll take that on my team every time.
I'm with you. The Yankees as a whole, I mean, they got to stay healthy. Obviously, they need Aaron Judge. I mean, they probably need Stanton, but I think the Judge is more valuable than Stanton in my mind. Not that we don't want Stanton on the field. Any surprises that really stand out to you? I mean, Gary Sanchez's continued struggles are just an amazement to me, but maybe this is who Gary Sanchez is. I don't know. Anything you want to comment there, or any other surprises on the team?
Well, the surprise to me is that the Yankees have been able to maintain kind of their pace despite the fact that somebody goes down every day. I mean, with the exception of the Rays, they pretty much slaughtered everybody else in their path. I mean, the Red Sox, they've turned into a Cape Cod League team. Everybody else, I mean, just kind of falls by the wayside. I mean, the Braves are a very good team, came into New York for 2 days and got chewed up. And I think that's a tribute to – look, I mean, nobody wants to credit the manager ever, no matter who the manager is. They certainly seem to be reluctant to credit Aaron Boone, who only won 203 games in his first 2 years as a manager. But clearly something is right. I mean, when you continue to throw out an army of Tachmans and Urshela's and Wades, and you still manage to win most of your games – that tells you that something's right. And if you want to credit the culture, that's fine. Well, who's implementing the culture every day? The manager is. It's interesting because a lot of people also aren't too happy about needing to credit Brian Cashman. Like to point to the fact the Yankees have won one World Series since 2000, and that's fine. That's fair. And I think Brian Cashman is the first person to say that that's how you should judge him. But the idea that the Yankees have been able to kind of rebuild on the fly and kind of create something that's going to be a contender for 10 years clearly, and has maintained a level of excellence since 2017. That's credit to the general manager too. So I mean, to me, that's the surprise. Look, we saw it last year. The Yankees won 103 games despite everyone going down for some significant amounts of time, and somehow the irregulars came in and filled in the gaps. And they're doing the same thing this year. I mean, the idea that a player like Clint Frazier has to fight for playing time, or Miguel Andujar is now spending multiple shifts in the minor league site, tells you that the Yankees are doing something right, because despite all these injuries, it's still hard to find at-bats for all the good players they have.
Yeah, they're very deep, very deep. And I think Aaron Boone gets a bad rap myself. I don't know what you got. You got to win a World Series, obviously, to get some people's credit ever. But I think the Yankees are set up well. I'd like to see him bring in a pitcher, hopefully a starting pitcher, and get some guys healthy. And I've spent a lot of time on the Yankees my first few shows, and I guess we'll talk about the Mets a little bit. What's wrong with the Mets?
Well, the Mets can't hit with runners in scoring position. It's really kind of simple. I mean, they're able to get a lot of runners on base. They are able to generate a lot of traffic on the base paths. And the fact is that they're running their record so far, the first 20, however many games they played, is that they can't score enough runs for all the traffic they generate, and that's been a problem. And they've lost a lot of games that they probably should have won with one key hit, or even with one key, well-placed out with a runner on third base and less than 2 outs. I mean, the Mets have been bad about that. Look, I mean, the other problem is the rotation, which is right now in tatters. I mean, in February, it looked like you were wondering where they were going to have room to use all their great starting pitching. They had 6 legitimate starters, and now they basically have 1.5. That's not fair, but we'll say 2. I mean, DeGrom is obviously given every 5 days. Porcello has been better, but you lose Syndergaard, you lose to injury, you lose Waka to injury, you lose Marcus Stroman to opting out, you lose Steven Matz to just him losing all manner of confidence and effectiveness. And so now they have to try and fill in the blanks. And David Peterson was a revelation for a while, but now he's on the shelf. And now you're kind of dipping into your bullpen, and that's really kind of a problem because the Mets bullpen is always kind of a flashpoint. It's already been something of a flashpoint. If you could rely on the Dylan Betances / Jarius Familia / Edwin Diaz troika to carry things along with Justin Wilson and a few other guys, that would be one thing. But I think that they were kind of hoping, in the best case scenario, to be able to have Seth Lugo be their workhorse in the bullpen and Robert Gesellman kind of be a reliable piece. I know both those guys are in the starting rotation. Worse, both those guys are in the rotation but aren't really capable yet. They're not stretched out of
Yeah.
giving you 5 and 6 and sometimes 7 innings right now. I mean, it's going to be a couple of weeks before they can do that. And so for now, you're talking about having to play a bullpen game just about every game that Jacob deGrom isn't pitching. And even deGrom so far this season has been a 6-inning pitcher. So, you're talking about a bullpen that's, in the hands of a rookie manager. I think he's done a fair job with that so far. But, if you're talking about every day where a starting pitcher is only going 2 and 3 and 4 innings, and the best you're going to get is 6, in some ways, the Mets might be better off when you start playing double headers, when you shorten the games. I mean, you start thinking about things in that kind of a context. A 7-inning game, suddenly if Jacob deGrom is your pitcher and he's giving you 6 innings, that's great. It goes right from the starting pitcher to the closer. So in a lot of ways, I think you're going to see baseball teams start to incorporate when they use their aces, because all of a sudden, you can probably get away with stealing a game with just one pitcher. That's where the Mets are right now. Right now, I mean, I still think they have enough to squeeze into the playoffs, but you know what? The one thing you have to do as a baseball team in 2020, I believe, is get to 500, and then let itself play out. You're probably going to see all teams that are 500 wind up getting those 16 playoff spots. That's probably going to be what the threshold is.
Yeah.
And so you kind of know what you're dealing with. The Mets were 5 games under to start the week. To their credit, they won the 3 games in Florida. They were probably a little bummed they didn't play last night, because I think they were feeling good about their chance of sweeping. But now we'll see where they are once they resume play. I mean, I think their next game is probably not going to be until Monday, when they probably play a makeup game against the Marlins at Citi Field. And like I said, I think they're probably going to wind up having to double up all 3 days next week with the Subway Series. But we'll see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, the Mets have always been I've got a lot of Met fans, friends, obviously, that are Met fans. And they're always a mystery to me. I mean, they seem like they should be better than, what the sum of their parts end up being. But they get into playoffs, as you said, in a short series, anything can happen. That's what's going to be crazy about this year's Major League Baseball. You get into a 3-game series in that first round, I think it is. I mean, anything could happen.
Well, plus, these teams that have a lockdown starter, and the Mets have one. I mean, Jacob deGrom is a guy that you're going to throw game 1 of any series. And even if they're the 8th seed and they draw the Dodgers, I mean, I'm sure the Dodgers aren't going to feel all that terribly comfortable if they have to face Jacob deGrom in game 1. And if you lose game 1, then all of a sudden you got to figure out a way to win 2 in a row. So
yeah,
it's the Mets have all. That's the thing that's been frustrating about these last couple of years. If you're a Mets fan, is that you really have always believed if you could just get into a short series, you have enough pitching to kind of make yourself competitive. It's certainly how they thrived in 2015. That and Daniel Murphy turning into Babe Ruth for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But they just haven't been able to do that. I mean, obviously the next year they got in the playoffs, and Noah Syndergaard gave them a wonderful starting performance in the wild card game, but they ran into Madison Bumgarner and then ultimately ran into one bad pitch from Familia, and that was that. But certainly the Mets are one of those teams. Like, I mean, you look at that at a handful of teams that have aces, have legitimate aces. I mean, even the Phillies, as many struggles as they've had. I mean, they can throw Aaron Nola at you. I mean, obviously the Nationals. I mean, they look like they're in disarray right now. But who really wants to face Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer in the first 2 games of a 3-game series? Good luck to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of good front. When you look at the front end of a lot of these better teams, there's a lot of really good front end starting pitchers. Number 1 starters today, a lot of them.
And that's what makes baseball so fascinating, is that you can line things up. But the fact is that if you have even today, when starting pitching seems a little marginalized, when nobody goes 9, when pitch counts kind of ruin the idea of starting pitchers completely dominating as they once did.
Right.
It's still intimidating to know that if you're starting a series against Clayton Kershaw, you got to figure out a way to beat Clayton Kershaw for as long as you're going to face him, whether that's 6 innings, 7 innings, however long it's going to be.
Well, it'll be an exciting time, I think. Anyway, is there anything else in Major League Baseball that's really surprised you so far? I mean, after a few weeks now, early on the season, we had a few surprises. The Marlins got off to a great start. I think the Rockies were off to a great start. But I think we're starting to kind of see things normalize a little bit. Maybe the Nationals being under 500 is a surprise. But anything else that stands out to you as outside of the New York area?
You know what? I mean, I can only speak for myself, and I know this is probably not going to gain widespread acceptance, but the rules that have been instituted this year, which some of them seemed a little harebrained, It seemed a little crazy. I mean, I have to confess that I've come to the point where I've done a 180 on almost all of them.
Really?
The 7-inning doubleheaders, I think, are once you get past the notion that things have always been the way they've always been, and that's kind of the way you have to kind of adapt to life in 2020 anyway with everything. Look, I mean, baseball games have been decided by 5 innings and 6 innings for 150 years when there's been rain involved. So the notion of shortening doubleheaders to 7 innings apiece, to me, look, as long as both teams understand what the rules are going in, I mean, it's a fair setup. And honestly, nobody wants to sit through 7-hour doubleheaders. They just don't. The players don't. Fans don't. I mean, fans can talk about how they love spending a day at the ballpark, and that's wonderful. But I really want to see how many people actually sit through on TV and watch all 18 innings and sometimes more of a doubleheader when those things are scheduled. To me, I mean, 7-inning doubleheaders make those things more palatable. And like I said, as long as both teams understand what's going on, then it's fair. The DH, I started off my life virulently anti-DH. I grew to accept its presence in the American League. And now that I've seen it every day in the National League, you know what? I don't need to see a pitcher hit. I'm not turned on by the double switch enough to where I think that pitchers hitting is enough of a lure to make it happen. I mean, I know they're supposed to go back to the non-DH rule next year and then revisit. I'm in favor of just saying, you know what, this is the way the game is now. The DH to me makes it a better game. It makes it a more interesting game. It's better for baseball players because there's now more jobs available for everybody. I mean, I just don't think there's a downside to it. I really don't. And anybody who tells me they enjoy watching pitchers strike out on 3 pitches, I mean, I just don't believe them, frankly. And the one that's really surprised me is I really was adamantly opposed to the runner on second base. And maybe that could be tweaked better. Maybe instead of after, starting with the 10th inning, it can maybe, play 2 innings of extra innings. Or maybe you start the 10th inning with a man on first, and then by the 12th inning, you start him on second. But honestly, I mean, again, both teams know what they're doing. I think it's fascinating the strategies teams have come to use. Whether you want to go sacrifice, play for 1 run, still play for a big inning. There's actually been more strategy introduced into the game because of it. And look, I mean, I get it. It's different. That's not the way Honus Wagner played the game. You're starting with a man on second in Lou Gehrig's time, so I get it. That's going to automatically be a non-starter for some people. It was a non-starter for me until I actually started to watch it. I'm not offended by it, and if anything, I've grown to enjoy it. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I also don't mind Zoom calls in 2020, so maybe I'm getting soft in my old age. But to me, I mean, I honestly I have no problem with the new rules. I think actually all of them have been beneficial. All of them have been helpful. I enjoy watching all of them. I mean, if that makes me a crazy radical off the wall, off the fence guy, then so be it. But I enjoy them. I do, and I understand that that's not going to be a popular opinion among certain factors and factions in certain sectors, and that's fine because that's I totally get it because I used to be on that side of the fence too.
Well, you got to be true to yourself, right? And I am a little old school, and I'm still having a little trouble coming around to some of the things. The DH, I think, in both leagues is inevitable. I think it'll be here as soon as next year myself. We don't after this year. I mean, doubleheaders aren't something that Major League Baseball schedules real doubleheaders that often anyway. So going forward, I don't think I'd care if there were 7-inning affairs. The man on second base to start extra innings is still something I've got to get my head around. I'm still not there yet, but I'm
not saying it should be something that people easily come to, and I'm surprised that I actually came to change my mind on all those issues also. But
yeah,
I mean, I think part of it is I've always raged about this in the newspaper business. Why do we do this? Well, we did this in 1927. Well, that's not good enough. It's not 1927 anymore.
Yeah.
And so I've raged against that thinking for a lot of years, and so I think that it's finally starting to infiltrate my hobbies. So I think that I think when it comes to baseball, I mean, I'm for whatever makes the game more interesting to more people, and I get it. There's a danger in alienating your core fans, and I think you have to be really careful about that. And I do think that that's a problem, but I can't. It's why I don't think you can necessarily just say this is the way it's going to be from now on. But I'm just talking about how I feel about it. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily, the way that baseball should proceed immediately. And Rob Manfred, the commissioner, has to be careful about not losing guys like you, Keith. I mean, guys who have invested their lifetimes in learning a certain way that baseball is supposed to look and supposed to be. And that's part of the balancing act of what baseball really is.
Well, I freely admit that, even though I've turned 60 now, I have to learn to be a little more flexible. My wife will probably laugh when she hears this, because I'm not the most flexible person in the world. And, but, I also didn't envision myself doing a sports webcast on the internet that thousands of people would watch.
There you go.
So, I've got to be a little more open-minded when it comes to some of this stuff like you are. And I'll promise to try to be that way. So I don't want to turn Bob Costas. I mean, I like Bob Costas, but I don't want to turn into him where everything is just awful about the changes in the game.
But even he's starting to come around on some of these things. And to me, I mean, it's kind of like, what did LBJ say? If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America. Well, if Manfred has gained Costas, then maybe he's gained a whole new demographic of baseball fans.
Yeah, I'll have to check into that because I hadn't heard that he was
something. I don't think he's around radical stuff, but I do know that he's expressed an openness to a lot of these things, more than you would expect, because he's kind of become the symbol for the old school hardline baseball core guy.
For sure. Well, that's all good. That's a great take. So let's move on a little bit to. I know you follow the NBA a lot too. We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs. These seem like they're going to go on for months, but I think they're going to end the season about the time they need to start next season. But any surprises so far? I know the Lakers losing their first game was a bit of a shocker, but anything else stand out there?
I think the games have been wonderful. I really do. I mean, to me, I mean, certainly the way it is now, where every day, every other day, you get every day you get 4 games lined up, one after the other, starting at 1:30 in the afternoon. I mean, look, I mean, I get it. In normal times, you'll never have that, and I think that normal times where you have fans and cheerleaders and atmosphere trumps what you have now. But for now, this will do. I mean, I love the fact that any time of the day I can tune in and watch a hockey game, watch a basketball game. And I think it's fascinating. Look, I mean, this whole setup is a great equalizer. There's no home court advantage. So I mean, every game everybody starts from zero at the same place. They're in the same neutral location. They're living the same very neutral lives, neutered lives even.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, I mean, look, I mean, if ever there was going to be a situation where both number 1 seeds in both conferences get toppled in the first game by the number 8 seeds, I mean, this was certainly the time to do it. I was a little more surprised by the Magic taking out the Bucks in the first game, just because the Magic are scuffling. They've lost some key players, and the Bucks were so dominant. The Blazers are coming in as the hottest team on the planet. So I mean, the notion that they would be able to steal game 1 off the Lakers, that was a little less stunning to me. And I think the Lakers kind of found their legs last night, and they'll be fine. I think the Bucks found their legs; they'll be fine. I don't know that the entire first round is going to go as chalk. The series that I'm just fascinated by is the Jazz and the Nuggets, and I'm not so sure that that's a series that a lot of people would watch in normal times, because all of those games would take place at 9:30, 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
Now these 2 games have both taken place at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, anybody who didn't realize just how great Donovan Mitchell is, they know that now. Anybody who didn't realize what good coaches Mike Malone and Quinn Snyder are, they should probably know that now, because they played 2 terrific games, 2 really high energy games, and that's just it's not a series that would have been available to a lot of people. And maybe it's not available to a lot of people at 3 o'clock in the afternoon either, obviously, because people thankfully still have jobs. Many people still have jobs anyway, and so maybe it's not quite as available to them either. But the fact is that watching that series has been really enjoyable for me. The Thunder and the Rockets has been a little one-sided, but I think that's got some intrigue to it. All of it does. I mean, the fact that you have these games lined up, cranking out one day after another. I mean, I think one of the problems in normal times is that, especially in the NBA, after the first round, you get these series that sometimes have 2 and 3 days in between games. I mean, here it's every other day, boom, 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 because they all want to get this thing done. I mean, they want to be able to. I mean, I know that the best case scenario is for this to end around September 23rd or so, and worst case is around the first or second week of October, depending on how long these series go. But to me, look, I mean, that's I just love the fact that every day there's a game. And
that's kind of a throwback to days gone by too. The shorter time between games in the playoff series, for sure.
And I think it just allows these series to maintain a rhythm and a flow. And I think, I think it's terrific. I mean, again, if I had the choice, I'd sign up for regular times, normal times, just because of everything involved and what normal times would be. But as as a secondary possibility. This hasn't been a bad one.
Yeah, you were talking about some of the great coaches, great coaching jobs being done out there. So I'll kind of ask you about we talked a little bit before. I know you've been more of a Nets fan in your life, but you certainly know the history of the Knicks, and I'd like to get your take on the Thibodeau hiring with the Knicks and can we expect some improvement someday from the Knicks?
I think Thibodeau is the right place to start. I think the Knicks need a little bit of gravitas. I think they needed somebody who knows what he's doing. Tom Thibodeau clearly does. But for a couple of twists of fate, I think he would have had a championship in Chicago. Things didn't end for him well in Minnesota, but he did change the culture there. And certainly things are looking really bright in Minnesota now since they won the lottery last night, so they can add another great player to what's already a pretty interesting core. Look, I think Thibodeau was the right guy, the right choice here. I would have been fine with Kenny Atkinson. Certainly would have been fine with Jeff Van Gundy, but I think Thibodeau is the best choice of those three. And look, is he going to be responsible for making the Knicks a 50-win team next year? Of course not. You need players. You need talent. I do think he's going to help assemble that talent. I think players are going to want to play for him. And I think the existing core for the Knicks, and I think there are some very intriguing pieces led by Mitch Robinson, led by R.J. Barrett. I do think they're going to thrive under somebody like Thibodeau, who's a player development guy first. I know that he's got this reputation for kind of being this old school grinder, yeller, whatever, taskmaster. But you look at his track record and you look at the players he's developed over time, even going back to his days as an assistant coach. I think he's exactly the guy that if they let him alone, let him do his job, and that's always a key element with the Garden. But I think if Jim Dolan starts to treat his basketball team the way he treats his hockey team and lets his people do the job, I think it'll help. I mean, will that mean if they play 82 games next year that they'll win 41 of them? I don't think so, but I think Knicks fans would take 35, and I think that's certainly an achievable goal. And look, I mean, the Eastern Conference, specifically the Atlantic Division, is going to be a bear next year with the Nets and the Sixers and the Raptors and the Celtics. But you're still talking about looking for incremental improvements, and I think that Thibodeau is the right building block for that.
Yeah, I kind of agree. If there's any organization in sports that needs a culture change, I think it's the Knicks, and it's a good start. Not a big fan of James Dolan, but it's funny that you bring up if he would treat the basketball team the way he treats the hockey team, we'd be so much better off. But we never seem to get there.
The most intriguing conversation in New York happened between Knicks fans and Rangers fans who bitch about their owners, and it's the same owner.
Yeah,
some of those people are having those arguments with themselves. A lot of Knicks fans are Rangers fans, so Rangers fans who love their owner want the Knicks owner to be driven out of town. It's a very surreal and bizarre situation.
Well, I think even as just a sports fan, I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, maybe with Kevin Kernan, that there are certain teams in sports that the sport is better off when the teams are better. I think the NBA is better when the Knicks have a good team. I think football's better when the Cowboys have a decent team. Hockey's better when the Rangers have a good team.
I agree with that. Look, I mean, and I think the baseball is better when the Yankees are a dominant team that everybody likes to hate. I
agree. Yeah,
it's different. I mean, that's kind of been the role the Astros have played the last couple of years, and I know the Red Sox a little bit, but it's just different. Nobody really hates the Astros. I don't care what they did, how awful you think their behavior was the last couple of years. No one works up a good sweat for the Astros, but everyone who doesn't love the Yankees hates the Yankees, and that's a right dynamic.
No, those are great things in sports. You got to have teams that people hate. Being a Patriot fan, it's odd being a Yankee fan, a Patriot fan, but it's just the time I grew up in.
It's odd or it's wonderful, depending on how you look at it, Keith.
Exactly. And
we're going to get a lot of hate mail if you start complaining about all the championships you won for being a Patriots fan and a Yankees fan in your lifetime. Let me count them up.
There is quite a few. And people
think 15, 16. No. Next thing you're going to tell me you're a Celtics fan too. And
no. I'm a Knicks fan. Knicks fan.
That keeps you humble with the other two.
The New England fan came about because, when I was a kid, the Jets had just won a Super Bowl, or, everybody's father was a Giant fan. And I was a little different. A friend of mine his dad took us when we were little kids to a Patriot game. And that's how I became a Patriot game. And we had season tickets in the 80s when I sat through a 1-in-15 season. So
I was going to say, Patriots fans don't have to actually, they don't have longtime Patriots. One of my best friends is a Patriots fan. So as I've told him, I said, you know what, you put up with a lot of years of Steve Grogan, so you can, you were entitled to watch Tom Brady's career too.
Right. Yeah. As long as you've been a fan, unless you're of a certain age and you came of age while the Patriots are winning, there are bandwagon jumpers. I said, where were you guys?
If you used to sing hosannas to John Hanna, then you've earned being a Patriots fan.
You got it. But being a Patriot fan, to my point, I know a little bit about the fact that, people love to hate good teams, right? And it's one of the things that's really good about sports. It makes it better.
One of the badges of honor. You're good if teams hate you. I remember growing up a Mets fan in the 80s. I mean, that meant in the early part of the 80s being the most pathetic team in baseball. And it became almost surreal in the mid 80s when the Mets became the most vilified team in the world, on the planet, in any sport. I mean, they were the Yankees for a couple of years, and that just felt weird because, what about us being the lovable, hapless Mets? I thought we were lovable, but when your team stops being lovable, that's when you probably picked the right team.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's very true. And, being a Patriot fan, things are going to change. Things are going to change somewhat with Tom Brady gone, obviously. Well, let's touch on the NFL real quick before we run out of time here. They're progressing towards the start of their season here in a few weeks. I think the Patriots are going to do okay. I don't think they're going to be what they were, but the bigger problem than the quarterback, I think, is all the players that have opted out outside of him. I know the NFL also hopes to have fans at some point, which I don't know if is realistic or not. But what's your outlook on the NFL?
Well, we'll start with your team first. I think as long as what's the old saying? They'll take my gun when they take it from my cold, dead fingers. Well, I'll believe the Patriots are dead when I see Bill Belichick home for the first round of the playoffs.
Good point.
And look, I mean, I'm not saying that he's a magician. Look, no coach is going to overcome a dearth of talent, but what he's established there, I think, is look. I mean, would they be considered a Super Bowl contender in my mind? No. Would it stun me if they finished first in the AFC East this year? No. I mean, everybody's kind of fallen in love with the Bills, and sure, that's a fashionable pick, and the Bills, have reason to be optimistic. But I certainly don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for them. I mean, I think the AFC East is going to be what most divisions are every year, where it's going to take 9 or 10 wins to win the division, as opposed to in past years, if you wanted to beat the Patriots, you needed to figure out a way to win 14.
Yeah,
because the Patriots are good for 12, 13 wins every year. So, I mean, would it stun me if you told me that the Patriots won 10 games this year and wound up, beating the Bills by a game in the AFC East? Of course not. To me, I mean, look, I mean, I think the Chiefs are the dominant storyline in sports right now, in that sport right now, just because of the quarterback, because of what they've established there. They're the defending champions, so someone's going to have to knock them off first. I just think that right now Pat Mahomes is the greatest show in all of sports. I really do. I mean, Dame Lillard in the bubbles kind of challenged that, I think, and I love watching Fernando Tatis Jr. in baseball, and there's a handful of hockey players who can take who can lift you out of your seat. But to me, what Mahomes does, and look, I mean, there are other guys who are there to challenge him if he falters, but right now I will stop what I'm doing to watch a Chiefs game. And I'm inclined to like the Chiefs anyway. I mean, I worked in Kansas City for a year. I know a lot of the people who work there. I was very happy that they won the championship because I know it's a city that loves that team to its core. So I'm inclined to kind of be happy when the Chiefs are doing well anyway. But just, I mean, if Patrick Mahomes, it's kind of the way it used to be when a Reggie Jackson or a Darryl Strawberry or name your slugger. If you're in your house and you saw them up, I mean, you stop what you were doing to watch their at bat.
Yeah,
I'll do the same thing if I'm wandering my house and a Chiefs game is on, or if I'm, on the Red Zone channel and I want them to get to the Chiefs game because I want to see what Mahomes is doing. That's how good he is, and that's how dominant the Chiefs can be. I mean, they were scary good in the playoffs last year. That's what I look forward to. In New York, I'm not looking forward to much of anything. I think the Giants are still going to scuffle this year. I think both teams have the same prime motivator this year. They have to be more certain on January 1st than they will be on September 1st about both Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. I mean, if both teams are are convinced on January 1st that they have franchise quarterbacks worth investing, the next 10 years in, then I think this will be a successful year for them. I don't think it's going to be measured by how many wins. I mean, I think either team would be very fortunate if they got to 6 or 7, and that's not going to really make anybody excited. That's just not going to get it done. But I just think that's the reality of where both teams are right now. They're both rebuilding. They're both trying to get back into the game. I think the Jets are a little bit farther along than the Giants, but that's not saying a lot. And I think I tend to trust Joe Douglas a little more than I do Dave Gettleman, but that can also change. And of course, it's football's a weird game, right? I talk about how fun the Chiefs are to watch, but if Patrick Mahomes tweaks his knee this year like he did last year and misses a couple of weeks, well, the whole equation is out.
Yeah, I think it's amazing he came back and played as well as he did so fast last year.
Fascinating. I think so too. I mean, I thought that his season was over. I thought they were going to certainly err on the side of caution with a 23-year-old quarterback, and of course, I think they're probably glad they didn't because the way things shook out.
It's funny obviously I've been a big Tom Brady fan through the years, and watching a guy like Patrick Mahomes play, as great as Tom Brady is, and he's one of the greatest winners in the history of sports, obviously, and a great leader. And it doesn't make him a bad athlete, but Patrick Mahomes can do things that Tom Brady could never even think about doing.
And Lamar Jackson's in the same category, and he's fun to watch also. And look, the position has evolved. I think one of the great things, people always talk about, well, the quarterback position is this now, it's that now. No, one of the great things about that position is that, and I think this has been the case forever. I mean, there was a time when you had traditional drop back quarterbacks and the wing T in the same league at the same time.
Yeah.
In the same way that you can be a great pitcher and you can throw 99, or you can just be Greg Maddux and never throw 89, and you can be great. I think that's one of the great things about the position of quarterback. You can do it a couple of ways. You can do it the way Tom Brady has done it, which is kind of a more traditional way that we look at it, kind of channeling Johnny Unitas and Joe Namath and Terry Bradshaw. Or you can be, what Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and quarterbacks like that are, which is you kind of making it up as you go along. You use your feet as well as your arms, and there have been quarterbacks who've been successful doing that also.
They're exciting to watch for sure. The game is as good as it's ever been in my mind right now. So, I've taken up a lot of your time this morning, Mike. I do appreciate you coming on. I wish I've got so much more that I wanted to talk to you about, and it's hard with everything going on once. We don't often have this, right?
Right. Everything's going to be, and wait till September. You have the Masters, the U.S. Open tennis. So it's going to be great.
I want to have you back on if we can. I want to ask you one more question actually, before we move on, because I'm really interested in your take on this. Obviously, college basketball season's a little far off yet, but I'd love to have you back on. I hope you'll agree to come on again because you've been a great guest. Well, I got to have your take on Rick Pitino at Iona. Well,
I mean, look, I've covered Pitino from the moment I started as a sports writer 31 years ago. He's been a guy that's been a favorite subject of mine, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. Look, I think that it's certainly his right to find another job. It's certainly Iona's right to hire him. I think there will be consequences for what happened in Louisville, and I think we're still kind of going to figure out what that is as all these appeals are shaken out. I think he's a guy who's learned his lesson a little bit. I think he understands what Iona is. It's not like a guy who just kind of fell out of the sky and is realizing, so what's the MAC about? This is a guy who started his career coaching at Boston University for 5 years, so he understands the limitations that he's in right now. But I also think he understands that he's a pretty good coach, and the MAC is the kind of league where a good coach is going to carry you a long way. So I actually think he's going to be wildly successful there. Just if he just relies on his talent as a coach, his talent as a motivator, I think he's going to get enough talent to where he can do fine there. Now, is he going to make them a national power? No, that's a different level. He's not going to be able to compete with his old friend Calipari in Kentucky, even if they play each other. But I think he's going to be very successful there. I think he's going to do well there. I'm not one of these guys who thinks he's evil personified. I don't. I get it. He's done some questionable things in his life, personally, professionally, whatever. Made some mistakes. I get that. But I also think he's an extraordinary coach. I think when you come right down to it, he is a guy who would have been Bob Hurley as a high school coach. He would have figured out a way to win 90% of his games because he's that good a coach. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that because he's kind of all glitz. He's kind of, he's got this image as being ultra slick, and I get it. I think he would admit to that. But I think in his heart of hearts, he's a guy who likes being in the diner at 2:00 in the morning, designing plays with salt shakers and napkins. I mean, he was that guy when he was 25. I think he's that guy in his 60s. I think he's a fascinating character. I'm glad I want to hire him because selfishly, as somebody who works in newspapers, I'm going to have a lot of fun covering him. And,
well, he's a great story for sure.
Well, look, I mean, I go back with him to where, he was a guy that I admired because he was a guy who came before me in the Long Island Catholic League as a player. So I always admired, his body of work as a player at St. Dominic's High School and at UMass. And so I've always been fascinated by him. I will be the first one to say I'm not the most objective guy to critique his world and his life for the pros and the cons. I've certainly been able and willing to write negatively about him when he had his incidents in Louisville, when he had the incident in the Italian restaurant, a couple years ago. But he's by no means a saint, but I do think he's one of the most fascinating characters in basketball. And when you get down to the X's and O's, he's as good as anybody who's ever lived.
Yeah, he certainly is an enigma, for sure. But as we talked about teams and sports being better when they're better, I think college basketball is better with Rick Pitino in it. There was a big furor up here, upstate last year when the Siena job was open and his name was floated like, some people had him come in here on a drop of a dime. And it would have been a huge hire for Siena, obviously. But
I think as much as anything what people are worried about besides the character issue is that, I mean, look, would it surprise anybody if the Nest looked around and said, who the best available coach is for our team now? It's Rick Pitino.
Yeah.
Well, do you think Rick Pitino is going to turn down the NBA again? I mean, so that, and I think that's kind of what the concern is that, I do think it's a little bit naive for people to take him at his word when he says, well, I'm here for the rest. This is my last coaching job. I mean, if it is wonderful, but, to me, just don't say it because, I mean, if you say it, then it's going to make it, twice as bad if you wind up going back on the word. So I'm not so sure that he's there for life. I hope he is. That'd be fun. But, I think that's the concern people have as much as anything.
And they probably should. I'm not sure that he could get a major college job again. But, if the NBA, I think an NBA team might jump on him for sure. Like as you said, the Nets would be a shot.
The one thing the Nets don't have, I mean, all due respect to Jock Vaughn, the one thing the Nets don't have right now is a big-time coach. And look, there's, you look, an hour away, there's a big-time coach lurking in New Rochelle. So I don't think that's going to happen. But if it did happen, would it stun me? No, it would knock me out of my chair. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Mike, I've loved having you on. I'm going to wrap up the show and I'm going to send you out of the room. But I'd love to chat with you for a second once I get done. If you can hang around for just a second. That'd be great. If you got to go, I understand, but I'd love to chat with you for just a minute when I get done. And I do appreciate you coming on with me today. You've been a great guest as I try to grow this audience, and it's been amazing what we've done in just a few weeks. I've been having a blast with this, and I appreciate you helping out.
Good luck with this, Keith. Looks like you're having a lot of fun, and that's exactly what we should all be looking to do in 2020. So good luck to you.
For sure. Thanks again, Mike. That was Mike Vaccaro from the New York Post. Columnist extraordinary. He can cover a lot of topics, as you guys heard today. I had so much I wanted to talk to Mike about, and it's impossible in an hour. And I do hope to get him back on soon. So I want to thank all of you coming today. I wish I could see you all in the room. I've got to work on this. I can see Sherry here and Bill and Kevin Myers, David. I can't see some of all the people that are here, and I don't know why. We'll kind of work on that, but I do appreciate you guys coming. I've been working on some new technology. I'm going to be on this weekend, as I've come on a couple of times now with, some takes on my own takes on the weekend, and I've got a system to take some phone calls, and we might test it out this weekend. So if you're around, probably Sunday morning, we'll take a shot at this, maybe 10:30ish. I'd love to take a few calls maybe, and we'll have some fun just playing around. We'll go live and see how that goes. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Joe Altieri and Wake Up to the Vibe. Joe's going to have some changes with Wake Up to the Vibe and the NLB network. More on that to come. And we're not going anywhere. We're going to have continue to grow this. I'm going to having fun. As I said, I'm not getting paid. I'm here to have fun. And that's what I want to bring to you guys. And if I can just transfer some of that excitement and the fun I'm having to you guys, then I've done my job. And And I appreciate you guys being here with me every Friday morning. And please share this video. Go to the TGI Sports Talk, like and share the page, and follow us. And we're going to grow this audience even bigger than we've had it. We've had, I think, the first couple of weeks, tremendous success, and it's in great part to you guys. So I want to thank you, and I hope you continue to come along and come along on the ride with me. I'll see you guys next week, and when my guest will be Hank Gola. We'll see you then. Bye bye.